and welcome back to Bookish Theories! In today's video, I would like to talk about Pixie's storyline, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the information that we have so far to see what they can tell us about the concept and the plot. Now, even if Pixie debuted just a few months ago, this is a group that managed to create a very interesting storyline set in a fantasy world full of darkness and mysteries. This is a narration divided into chapters that follows the girl's journey in a magical forest, and so far the story has led us through the first 3 chapters of this adventure. We have chapter 1 called Wings, which is the debut single that introduced us to the world of the Pixies. Then we have chapter 2 Bravery, which came out with the title track Let Me Know, and last but not least we have chapter 3 Temptation, which is their latest comeback with Addicted. Today we're gonna take a look at the storyline following the information that we have up to this point, so without wasting any time, let's jump right in and see what's going on. Now, in many respects, we can say that Pixie's storyline is structured like a fairy tale set in a different time and a different space. In this tale set once upon a time, the girls play the role of 6 fairies who live together in a dark forest, and these fairies were all born without wings. This is something that to a certain extent isolated them from the other fairies, but even if they were mocked for being different, they still managed to find solace in each other and live happily together. According to the intro of chapter 2, their friendship allowed them to maintain a pure soul despite of the pain and neglect that was inflicted upon them, and this purity was also protected by the bond that they share with the majestic butterflies that lived in the forest. This initial harmony, however, is soon disrupted when one of the fairies finds a pair of broken wings while she's looking for flowers to tie her hair. According to the information that we can find throughout the videos, these wings have been torn apart into small fragments, and in the story, the fairy that finds them is none other than Dajong, who is the unofficial protagonist of this tale. Now, when Dajong shows the wings to the other fairies, the girls are initially overjoyed by this discovery because even if the wings are broken and cannot be used, they love them as if they were their own. Despite of their happiness, however, this beautiful find will soon prove to be the cause of their downfall because starting from the night onwards, Dajong will start having nightmares that she cannot actually understand. Every night, the fairy dreams of a witch with red eyes and a dark cloak. In the dream, the witch tells her that if she gives her the broken wings before the red moon rises, then she will give a pair of shining wings to each of the 6 fairies. In case she refuses, on the other hand, the witch will curse them all instead, so the dream obviously confuses Dajong, who initially doesn't know what to do. As Wings foreshadows, however, the temptation of the witch is already starting to influence her behavior because even if she doesn't know who she's dealing with, the voice of this creature is already luring her in. You see, in the song, this is a whisper that is both scary and inviting. The witch's voice encourages the fairy to trust herself and dive into an adventure that will make her bloom like a flower, so when Dajong eventually tells the others about the vision, she also comes up with a plan that will change their lives forever. In the story, Dajong suggests to go find the witch before the red moon rises, so by the end of chapter 1, the fairies venture in a forest of thorns to go find this entity. Now in Wings, their choice is described both as a source of hope and as a source of dread. On the one hand, the fairies want to find the witch because they want their wings and see this opportunity as something that will finally allow them to fly. Once they get their wings, the girls can finally become the pixies that they were born to be, so this is a dream come true as well as the chance that they were waiting for all along. On the other hand, however, the lingering presence of the witch is also something that is slowly choking them like sin, and this temptation is a source of torture that they seem unable to escape. In chapter 2 Bravery, for instance, this concept is explored with a sudden change in the narrative that reflects the influence that the witch is having on their bond. If at the beginning being together was enough to make them happy, now their greed is awakening a side of them that they never knew before. Once again, the main victim of this transformation is Dajong herself, but as we'll see in a second, the other fairies are being affected as well. You see, in this new chapter of the story, the girls are in the Forest of Thorns looking for the witch before the red moon rises, when at one point they decide to take a break and rest for a while. One by one, all the fairies fall asleep in the middle of the woods, and when Dajong is the only one left awake, she hears the witch's whispers yet again. This time, however, we also see an escalation in this entity's demands, because if at the beginning the witch only wanted them to find her, now her request is much darker and scarier. In this new message, the witch explains that if they keep moving as a group, they will never make it on time because the red moon is about to rise and the girls are still far behind in their quest. In order to solve this problem, the witch actually proposes to sacrifice one of the fairies to allow the others to succeed. In the whisper, the entity tells Dajong that if she pushes one of her friends off a cliff under the red moon, then she will give all the remaining fairies the piece of wing that she promised, and that Dajong's piece will be the shiniest of them all. This is obviously an insane request to fulfill, and at the beginning, Dajong herself is confused by this demand. In the story, however, we also see that their greed is essentially blending their judgment and poisoning their soul, so as the others sleep, Dajong comes up with yet another plan. You see, at the beginning of their quest, the girls put the broken wings instead of a box that they're now carrying with them. As the others are sleeping, Dajong decides to steal the box and hide it in a place that only she knows, and after she's done doing that, she decides to wake all the other fairies with the exception of one. Blinded by her greed, Dajong tells the others that the box disappeared and that the fairy that is still sleeping is the one that took it because she was the last one who was seen with the box. Now back in Wings, we saw that the fairy with the box was none other than Dia, and even if she was indeed handling the box, it's also true that Dajong is the one who stole it to begin with. In the story, Dia is innocent, but Dajong is framing her because she's been seduced by the temptation of the witch. She tells the others that Dia took the box because in that way she could keep the wings and get the reward by herself, and even if at first the others are in disbelief, they're eventually convinced. At this point, the fairies are angry at Dia because they all made a promise that they think that she broke. Thinking that Dia is a traitor, the girls cannot believe that she can sleep so peacefully despite of her betrayal, but little do they know that the real traitor is the one that is feeding them these lies. Taking advantage of their anger, Dajong continues to fulfill the witch's request. Since she's painting Dia as a traitor, she tells the others that if she wakes up, none of them will succeed in their quest. Because of that, the only way to be sure that Dia will not betray them anymore is to push her off a cliff so that she won't get in the way, and sure enough, this is exactly what happens next. While Dia is still sleeping, the other fairies lift her up and end up pushing her off a cliff while the red moon rises. This means that by the end of chapter 2, the pixies did indeed fall into the temptation that will make them addicted in the next installment. Before we get to that, however, we need to take a look at Let Me Know, because in that video we discover new clues that can help us understand the stakes that the fairies are actually facing. At the beginning, for instance, the video opens with the girls lifting Dia up, and right off the bat this is very important because this opening already foreshadows the climax of the second chapter. In this context, Dia's sacrifice is what causes the fairies' downfall, because them unknowingly betraying their friend is what allows darkness to take over them. Since their friendship is what protects the purity of their soul, them sacrificing Dia destroys this purity, and in the story this mistake will have bigger consequences than what it seems. Now in the video, this concept is actually explored in Sua's scene, because in the story she's actually associated to a golden apple. This might be a reference to the Greek myth of the Apple of Discord, which is a story about the way a small dispute can lead to a much bigger conflict. This is a story that centers around Eris, which is the Greek goddess of strife, as well as the exact opposite of Harmonia, which in turn is the goddess of harmony. In the myth, Eris causes a fight among Hera, Athena and Aphrodite, and these are the three main goddesses of the Greek pantheon. In the story, the goddess of strife challenges the Trojan prince Paris to give a golden apple to whoever he thinks is the most beautiful goddess. In order to win this title, the goddesses try to bribe Paris with different prizes. Athena promises wisdom and invincibility in battle, Hera wants to give him riches and power, while Aphrodite promises the love of the most beautiful woman on the planet. When Paris eventually chooses to give the apple to Aphrodite, this event will eventually lead to the beginning of the Trojan War, because as it turns out, the most beautiful woman is none other than Helen, and Helen is the wife of the king of Sparta. In the myth, a meaningless fight over an apple will lead to a war that will last 10 years and that will kill thousands of people, and in the story this concept is referenced to foreshadow the gravity of the girl's actions. If in the myth the conflict is caused by vanity, in our story the dispute is actually caused by greed. Dajong is tempted by the prospect of having the shiniest wings, Dia is accused of betraying them out of greed, and in turn the others betray Dia because they are following their own greed as well. Their desire to get the wings will eventually lead to the destruction of their friendship, their purity, and the bond that made them happy, but in Let Me Know it's foreshadowed that this greed is not only destructive but also caused by deceit. You see, in the video we see that Dajong is actually associated to blue roses, which is something that we see in Addicted as well. These are flowers that symbolize the desire for something that is impossible to obtain, and in the video we see that this flower will eventually burn the moment Dia's sacrifice is finalized. This implies that their desire to get their wings is actually a desire that is impossible to obtain. It's a lie that blends the girls with greed, but that at the end will amount to nothing, so in this context we can say that all the girls are being tricked. The witch here is leading them to their downfall with an empty promise that will never come true, and the fairies are falling right into this trap. Now, by the end of the video, we see that the girl's mistake will eventually lead to the apparition of a giant butterfly in the fog, and this event brings us right into Chapter 3 Temptation, where this figure appears once again. Now, the latest chapter of this story begins right after the girls push Dia off the cliff. In the worldview video, we see that despite of their best efforts, Dia survived and is now waking up alone in the middle of the woods. When she screams in pain and fear, however, a butterfly suddenly appears out of nowhere and lands on her mouth, muting her screams. When this happens, the witch gives her a potion that she promises will dissipate all the pain and guide her to the wings, so Dia knocks the butterfly off her mouth and drinks the potion that the witch gave her. As we see in Bewitched, this event will eventually lead all the girls to fall into the witch's spell, because after Dia drinks the potion, the sky turns red. Since Dia was tricked into drinking the potion, now she is addicted, and from that moment on, the witch will be with her and Dia will be hers. As it turns out, however, the same fate awaits the other girls as well, because as we see in the video, Dajeong's desire for something impossible to obtain will eventually lead them all to destruction. You see, if in Chapter 2 we saw that the witch used the girls' greed to lead them to temptation, Dia was the last one left to be tempted, because before she was a victim that did nothing wrong. The moment she takes the potion, however, the witch's curse eventually unravels and the red moon rises, because at that point all the fairies have been corrupted and cursed. As we see in the trailer, even if the girls are still separated, this event leads them all to the end of the forest. The first to get there is actually Dia herself, which we see running away in fear after taking the potion. Her escape leads her to a butterfly waiting for her in front of a giant door, and as she enters, she leaves a trail of footprints behind. When it comes to the other girls instead, when they see the sky turning red, they sense that something went wrong, so they start looking for Dia at the bottom of the cliff. While they're trying to find her, however, a thick fog appears out of nowhere, making it impossible to find the right way, but this changes when a flock of butterflies shows up to clear the air. Their presence eventually leads them to the door at the end of the forest, and after finding the key on the wings of one of the butterflies, the girls follow Dia's footprints and enter the door. Now this is important because the appearance of the butterflies might foreshadow the idea that not everything is lost. You see, at the beginning, the story told us that the purity of the girls' soul was not only protected by their friendship, but also by the bond that they shared with the butterflies. These butterflies have followed them throughout all their journey, and in Chapter 3 we not only saw them helping the fairies clear the fog, but we also saw them trying to stop Dia from drinking the potion. These visuals might imply that even if the pixies are eventually corrupted by the witch, the butterflies might be a guiding presence that will eventually lead them towards a solution. If the butterflies protect their purity, then their help must signify a change for the better, but as it turns out, the butterflies themselves might have their own reasons for doing what they're doing. You see, in the trailer, we discovered that on the other side of the door, the girls find the same giant butterfly that we saw at the end of Let Me Know. When this creature flaps its wings, the butterfly transforms into a fairy with only one wing, thus implying that the fragments that the girls found at the beginning were actually stolen from the fairy that is now appearing in front of their eyes. Now up to this point it's unclear who this fairy is and what happened to her, but following the information that we have so far, it's possible that the witch might have imprisoned this fairy in order to steal the wing that she then used to bewitch the pixies. Since this fairy transforms into a butterfly moreover, it's also possible that this entity might be a powerful figure for the butterflies themselves. If this is the case, then the butterflies might have led the pixies at the end of the forest in order to free her. Up to this point, this is just a guess, of course, because for all we know, the butterflies might even be on the side of the witch that is tricking them, but to know the truth, we'll have to wait for the next chapter to come out. In the next comeback, we'll possibly discover the identity of the fairy with the broken wings and what's her role in the story as a whole, but for now, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!